I'm Cameron Strang, and welcome to Unedited. You probably know comedian Pete Holmes from his hit HBO show Crashing, as well as his top-rated podcast. He grew up in a devout Christian family, went to a Christian college where he actually wanted to be a youth pastor, married his college sweetheart, and then when trying to pursue his comedy career, went through a very hard divorce. If you've seen Crashing, you know the premise of the show follows that narrative. It's a deeply personal project for Pete. The aftermath of the divorce actually sent him on a journey of wrestling with faith and doubt. And as you'd expect, he's come out on the other side a very, very different person. I was able to visit Pete at his home in LA as the second season of Crashing was about to premiere. We sat in his garage / converted bonus room / there's a big sauna in there, and talked about his story, his process of deconstructing and reconstructing faith, divorce, making an autobiographical comedy series, and a lot more. Even the prosperity gospel comes up. It was a fascinating and fun 2 hours, and I'm excited you're going to hear the whole thing. But because the conversation is so long, we're actually splitting it into 2 parts. So here is part 1 of my conversation with comedian Pete Holmes, unedited.
I feel like I'm right on schedule because I'm 38. I'm about to be 39. And I'm feeling more equanimity and peace than I ever have in my life. And that sort of spiritual freedom is very interesting to me. Because there is so much, I've experienced, I'll just speak for myself, so much suffering in regards to what derived from a very earnest desire to know God led to a lot of pain.
Right.
And for very human reasons, for very, kind of, I don't know how to put it, but like churchy reasons, or people with good intentions kind of leading me a weird way. And now that I'm almost 39, at the end of your readership, I do feel kind of...
I'm 41, so hopefully not all of them just...
No, I know. But the statistical, I feel that speaks to me as I'm like... Because it is a process, and I'm still in it. I'm sure you're still in it.
Of course.
There's no great conclusion. You know, I'm writing a book about it, and what's interesting about it...
I didn't know you were writing.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I just said that like you knew. I'm writing a book about my spiritual journey.
Are you working with Rob on it?
I'm not really. I mean, he's given me feedback.
I've known Rob since his Grand Rapids Numa days, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. I was just listening to the Robcast. Rob, I keep trying to get Rob to do ads on his podcast because I'm like, you don't understand. Because, he has cool shoes, for example. He's a shoe guy. I'm like, just reach out to that company, get a promo code, and work something out. It doesn't have to be a lie. And he won't do it.
You don't want to commercialize spirituality.
He doesn't feel...
He still has a pulpit mentality then. I mean, almost like you don't want to commercialize the sanctuary, There's a spiritual trust there.
Yes, I think you're right. And I think there's something noble about it. But really what's great about Rob is you don't get the sense that he's trying to do that.
Right.
You get the sense that he's cleaned the cobwebs enough out of his own attic that he knows what he's about.
Yeah.
And he sleeps better. And talk about equanimity and talk about peace. This is a guy who goes, I think that will add a little static to the radio frequency. The song will still be playing, but I'll just hear a little in the background. And so he doesn't do it. And I know this for a fact. I've been very, very, very close with Rob for many years now, a handful of years, but very close. And he's not doing it. So I'll tell you that in an interview. You know what I mean? He's just straight up doing it because that's what he does. Because it's like a joke. I'm like, I tell him what he could be making. I'll tease him what he could be spending it on. All these, not a Porsche. I'm talking about that's college tuition for your son. You should do this. And and then when I put his son, Trace, his podcast on today, and he didn't do the ads, there was something kind of like a stream. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's just a stream in the woods and you see it. And the stream doesn't say, brought to you by Pepsi or Alpha Brain. And I am brought to you by Alpha Brain, but there's something nice about seeing Rob just doing his thing.
Yeah.
And not worrying about
his journey since Grand Rapids has been him, authentically following his convictions.
That's what's so compelling about Rob.
You know, whether you agree with his conviction or not, he says, I believe this to be true, and I'm going to stand in this lane. And if it's not for you, that's okay.
And he does. You know, Alan Watts talks about that is believing. For example, he talks about, and by the way, I'll reference this. This is something I will endorse. It's on iTunes. It's called You're It. It's a series of talks Alan Watts gave. And he talks about how we have to honestly love God, meaning don't love God because he tells you to love him, but to mean it. And he's so funny. He's brilliant. He also talks about being honest if you don't love God. He's like, you're a bore. All you do is boss me around and you make me afraid and judge. And you hear it. And if you're like me, I literally just got the chills just thinking about somebody with the audacity to say that. Because for a lot of us, we think of God as like a boogeyman or an afterlife guard, like a lifeguard kicking us out of the pool or whatever. So to have somebody be like, this all comes back to Rob, meaning he doesn't believe because he ought to believe. Mm-hmm. He believes because he believes. And he's a master at figuring out, even if you don't want any of the Jesus stuff, you can read How to Be Here, for example, which is a great book, great audiobook too, and just get somebody who goes, finding what you're about and living that authentically is the point. And that's a Richard Rohr quote too. It's hanging up in my house. I don't know, you probably didn't see it. We walked through so fast. But it says to humbly and proudly return what you've been given. So it's like about mining who you are, what you believe. I'm not going to speak for Rob. I'll say my opinion is I don't want atheists to stop being atheists necessarily. I won't even say necessarily. I don't need them. I don't need to interrupt their trip, you know? Yeah, and I see that. It's not your job. Yeah. It's not my job and it's not even my burden. I don't, right. I used to. I spent the majority of my life, my spiritual life, thinking it was my job to enlighten and make everyone like me. And now I don't feel that anymore. I see that as such an essential part of the play and the dance of what we're doing. So when I see Rob, I get the same sort of charge as I can get talking to a very articulate, intelligent, passionate, Penn Jillette is a wonderful example, atheist. You just see someone being who they are, dyed in the wool, in their marrow, and they're not super interested in making you into a copy of them. Mm-hmm. And that just lights me up. It makes me so excited. Well, that coming from both sides.
I think that authenticity thing, is what I loved about Crashing. There's several things I loved about the first season of Crashing. One, it was actually really funny.
Oh, thanks, man.
Two, you were so open about your divorce and the pain, and obviously, it's a fictional adaptation of an autobiographical journey.
Yeah, it was, but a lot of it was.
And I went through a divorce.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, and so with that kind of going from the sheltered church world, divorce, and then what? So I appreciated you ripping the scab off and poking at that pain that I went through and thought it was healed. So that was great.
Imagine doing it. Yeah. I'm saying it was very painful.
That's what I want to get to in a minute. That's insane. Yeah. Third, you managed to get Jars of Clay on HBO, which is just a win for the ages. That's just amazing.
It's funny. The people that noticed the Jars of Clay thing, and this is a credit to Jed, is there were only a couple things that he didn't understand. One was, why isn't the pastor wearing a collar in the final episode?
Yeah.
He said, Jed very appropriately, he directed that episode and he was like, he looks like a doctor. He does, if like you were drawing a New Yorker cartoon, you would put him in a priest's collar and a black shirt, and it just reads better visually. And literally that was the only disagreement. Sounds like we debated. We didn't debate. I just had to go like, I just think you have to trust me on this. They don't wear collars.
Well, honestly, Hollywood depictions of church,
they're off.
Always. It's like literally nobody involved in this stepped foot in a church.
Right. That's exactly.
I would say an exception would be Blackish. They've covered the ABC sitcom, Anthony Anderson. They've shown different. They actually had a whole episode about they were visiting a kind of a hipster church and then Black Gospel church, and they actually got the nuances and the differences and stuff. And I was like, and it's so weird when you see it accurate on. Yeah. You guys got it accurate.
You don't have to turn the volume that up, for it to be funny.
Right.
Almost everything in that episode, for example, the guy, with the baby. So there's a couple, I forget their names, but there's a guy, they have a baby. And it's supposed to just kind of pull at Pete's heart. He's seeing a Christian couple with a baby, and he just got divorced, and he's there with Artie Lang. And it's like, how did everything go so wrong? And he's missing his home. And he says, every Friday we watch a movie. We call it movie night. And that was literally something me and my family have laughed about, because this guy, his name's Richard Rhodes. He is an associate pastor at my old church. And he went up on stage and said that so earnestly.
We call it movie night.
We call it movie night. And I bet if I talked to him, I don't think he would know why I think it's so funny. But he was like, every Friday, me and my family, we rent a movie. He sounded like Bush, I guess, W. Bush. Be like, we get around, we make some popcorn. We call it movie night. And I was the one in the family that found it hilarious. But then later I told my family, and we still say we call it movie night. So to put it in the show,
it's great.
But to show that sort of guileless, it's polity. It's nice. He's a sweet person saying we call it movie night. Comedians are the other side of it. We go like, I'm sorry, you call it movie night? You think that's special? Like, we're in the back of the room going, this an idiot. But like just to take that snippet, not to be guessing, what do church people talk like? Some, not all, and to put it in their mouths. And there was a lot of stuff that we cut from that too, unfortunately for time.
I thought the I don't know, the Pete character, the way you depicted him, kind of pre-bubble bursting. Even when he's going through the pain, he's driving into the city, he's listening to Joel Osteen and all that stuff.
I know Joel, I don't know him. I call him Joel. Got in trouble. Like, that was the wrong choice. Obviously, I don't endorse that in any way. But he was the voice of the type of faith I had when my wife left me. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting.
No, but
I apologize. When I'm interviewed, I really dive in. You know what I mean? I'm like, you hear how much I talk on my own podcast. I'm like, this, I don't even have to try to get anything out of you.
Yeah, literally one of the guys I was talking to when I landed, and we're just kind of like talking about this. And I was like, I on the plane was listening to one of your recent episodes again. And I was like, I think I'm just going to be able to like set the topic and he'll just go.
Well, it's called a day off. When I have people like me on my own podcast, which I do, Reza Aslan is a great example of that. You call it a day off, which is a term Conan uses for Martin Short when he's on the Conan show.
Oh my gosh.
He just says like, how are you? And he just goes. It's the best. But I have to say, as
Robin
a podcast,
Williams would have been like that.
Exactly. As a podcast host, when someone comes on, people think, I'll talk about this all day. People think that I just can't help but interrupt, or that I have to talk about myself. And it's not that it's all strategic, but a lot of it is strategic. Because like Rivers Cuomo just did it, and his assistant was like, just so you know, Rivers is kind of thoughtful. He's not really going to want to banter with you. Not that because he's deliberate. You're recording him. He doesn't want to fuck up. He's a big star. And I was like, okay, so if you listen to that episode, I'm interrupting the fuck out of him. Yeah. And it's to get him to talk. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, listen, it works. Nobody, I don't look at my Twitter mentions anymore, but I bet if I did, people would be like, hey, Pete, shut the fuck up, all this stuff. But they don't. I always want to say, you interview him. You interview him. I want to see what you get. Yeah. I want to see, I'm getting adamant about perceived complaints. I don't even know if they're real, but like when people say stuff like that, they don't understand that there's a certain atmosphere you create of urgency. Yeah. It's not competition. It's not machismo. You just go like, no, we're talking. I'm not going to take your stock answer. And when I do 5,000, this is like one of the first ones, 5,000 interviews about crashing, you better slap me off my axis. Otherwise, you're going to get the same interview as the last guy and the next person.
What I like about what you do, Mark Maron does it, and you guys aren't
exactly. I learned from Mark. Yeah.
Mark opens up and sets the person at ease, and then they open up.
That's exactly right.
And so it sounds like Mark wants to talk about himself, but he's not.
That's it. Do you think people are like, I've heard that story before. I'm like, I'm there when I tell it off, Mike. It's a great Ram Dass line. He says, how many times do you think I've heard it? Because he was going and doing these tours. It's like, I've heard it too. And believe me, I get it if sometimes you might listen. Again, this is all imagined. But like, and you're like, oh, Pete's going to tell this story. I love how worked up you are about
imagined criticism.
I know. But isn't that how we live a lot of our lives? Is we're in our heads showering, having an argument. I try not to do this. Obviously, it's a goal is to like not do that. But because your brain can't tell the difference. So it just creates stress hormones and stuff. It's bad for you. But sometimes I do go like, if I rue the day if somebody comes up to me and says, you talk too much on your podcast. I'll just be like,
okay, everybody's now officially warned. Do not do that.
Well, I won't be mad at them. I'll just be like, you need to understand why. Because when you're sitting with someone and a publicist says they don't talk, you go in with the cattle prod. And Rivers was great. I didn't think he needed it, but I wanted to see, and you only have an hour, I wanted to see how deep we could go in an hour.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the guy in the first episode of the first season of Crashing. We were talking about the construction phase of faith.
Oh, can I tell you one thing?
Yeah, please.
Joel Osteen, this is the last thing I'll put a pin on that. I was listening to Your Best Life Now, changed my life. It was kind of the first positive thinking, I don't know what you call it, just like, it's prosperity gospel, but I had never heard anything like it.
Seriously?
Yeah.
See, I grew up in the prosperity gospel.
Oh, really?
Like Tulsa, faith healers, prosperity, name it and claim it stuff.
Whoa.
So, I went to Oral Roberts University.
No way. I was just thinking about that today.
Yeah.
Was that because I saw a woman eating a banana in her car? Didn't Oral Roberts say you couldn't eat a banana? Or that's the other one?
No, that one. Or Oral was the one who went up in a tower and said that the Lord, he had to raise like $8 million and the Lord wouldn't let him leave the tower or something back in the 80s or something.
Wow. Did that work?
I think so.
Well, good.
Because I went to the school 10 years later, so it must have. I don't know.
I mean, how nice was the school? The $8 million school?
Yeah, no.
But there's another Christian college where they had pink sidewalks and blue sidewalks. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Bob Jones University.
Bob Jones.
In South Carolina.
And Bob Jones has an unwritten rule that women can't eat bananas without cutting them up.
I do know for a fact because I went to a Fundamentalist Baptist high school.
You know how they must be.
I know. Like, they would come and recruit at our school. Like
school would?
Yeah, Bob Jones.
Would come to Oral Roberts?
No, would come to my high school.
Oh,
Fundamentalist Baptist, like hardcore fundamentalists. And they would try to get the students to go there. And we would ask these questions. It was a legit thing. Every day at 7:00 in the morning, you had to be out of bed with your bed made and start your day every day. There was a dating parlor where the only room in the school where you could spend time with the opposite gender.
Wow.
And they would have chaperones. If you went on a date off campus, you had to have a chaperone with you. You were not allowed to walk on the same sidewalk and hold hands. It's all real. It's crazy. And it's still in existence, I guess. I don't know, but
it's just, it feels like the Creation Museum University. You know what I mean?
I went to that.
To the Creation Museum?
Yes. I heard it open. Everybody was making fun of it. And me and my cynical friends went on a road trip to see it for ourselves. And it's like a Genesis theme park. I mean, it's incredibly well done.
Did you go to love it or to tease
I
it?
went to have my own opinion of it.
Yeah, good for you.
And I didn't want to just take the cynical press.
I get that.
Right up on it.
I actually deeply respect, this is hard to say because the Creation Museum really does seem destructive in a lot of ways. It stands
for everything that I'm against.
No,
but again, I wanted to see it for myself.
So I'm going to take them off the table. What I want to talk about is Mormons. Mormons.
They're fair game. Them and the Amish. Totally fine.
Well, actually, Mormons and the Amish kind of work for me. And Jews for Jesus. I have a soft spot in my heart for anybody who forfeits everything for some weird meaning. I guess that means non-regular Christian.
Sure.
That's kind of my bias. I just mean if you get disowned by your family because you become a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness or is less common Amish or a Jew for Jesus, certainly a persecuted group. Yeah. I'm just kind of like, I think you get it. I don't think they get everything.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody gets everything.
Sure.
But I think they understand something. I was just thinking about this, like any good superhero has to give up his family. Have you noticed? Like Spider-Man becomes Spider-Man. He has to keep his identity secret.
Right.
Otherwise, they're going to kill Aunt May and they're going to kill Mary Jane. But ultimately, for Spider-Man to become who Spider-Man needs to become, he kind of needs to make a choice to save the falling school bus over Aunt May. In the movie, he gets both.
Right.
He saves both.
Right.
But that is the call that Jesus makes, too. Jesus is actually pretty staunchly anti-family. I'm not saying he doesn't like family. But he in my reading, he seems to be making the point that you need to pick the bus over Aunt May.
Huh.
Like you need to you're going to be found out and your villain, meaning your fears and your, terror, is going to come and threaten your family. And you need to be able to go, okay. And that's what I see when I see a Jewish person leaving an Orthodox Jewish family to go to Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a Red Sox fan becoming the manager of the Yankees, not just a fan,
right.
an owner of the Yankees. It's like such a huge thing. And I just kind of quietly, which is why I like movies like that Ben Stein movie about creationism. I like that stuff. It's kind of like in the Matrix where Morpheus is like, it's our what's he say? It's our propensity for disobedience that brought us all here. Because they're trying to get everyone to come back to Zion. And he's like, let's not go to Zion. And I think we're not going to because everyone here disobeys. So anybody that's kind of like interested in the spirit and interested in that over all else needs to realize that at some point they might be called to do something like that. And they might already do it. They might be ready to do it. And I think we might be called to do it. This sounds like I'm getting people ready to like, murder, suicide ourselves or something. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying there's something admirable just about even the guy who opens the Creation Museum, even though I think it's harmful, acrid and disgusting and backwards, there's something in there that I go, maybe in a past life you were like some weird martyr for Hinduism or something. Like, I don't know.
Honestly, I went because I wanted to, I wanted to understand how you could, what a museum about young earth creationism would say or do. Like, what are they showing? And when I went there, it opened recently when I went there years ago. And there was, homeschool groups and that's who was there. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Keep going.
And it was like, it was mistitled, I think, at the end of it. It was well done. They spent a ton of money. It was ride designers from Universal Studios.
No way.
Oh, yeah, it was quality. But it wasn't a museum. It wasn't, there was no science or explanation. It was literally just, it should have just been called the Genesis Experience or something like that.
Right.
And as you see Noah's Ark, and you see these things.
Well, museum is an affront to science. It's like saying, we're a museum.
Right.
And you're like, come on.
Yeah, it was rough. Okay. The guy who, in the first episode of Crashing,
about that.
the construction phase.
I didn't even tell you what I meant. Oh, it's stupid. After my wife left me, I tried to listen to Your Best Life Now again, and it might as well have been in Aramaic. Like, I couldn't hear it.
Oh, yeah, because I said...
Because I experienced pain for the first time in my life, for the most part. I experienced pain, and I put on this guy going, just go out there and be good.
Do you know...
And God will give you what you want. And I'm like, buddy, I did everything I was supposed to. And I was laying on my bed. I've told the story before, but trying to wake up because I thought I had died. And I thought I was in some sort of purgatory, which I didn't even believe in purgatory. But I was like, I don't feel alive anymore, but I somehow haven't crossed over. I felt like some sort of weird spirit in the in-between because I didn't know my wife was cheating on me, but she was so distant. And she was everything to me as a young man. And I was just kind of like, what the fuck is going on? So I put on Joel Osteen, which used to make me feel so happy. And then this became my obsession with a theology and a worldview that includes suffering. Because I can't have a guy that just goes, just eat the buffet. It's included with the cruise.
This is how screwed up our podcast is. When that book came out, I was in Target and there was a Your Best Life Now, the game. Board game. So I bought it. And we played it in its entirety on our podcast for an hour. We did an hour, we did a show, and we said, okay, now the show is over. Hit stop. Because now we're going to just play Your Best Life Now, the game. There were literally, like chance cards and stuff, Monopoly. There are literally spots where you have to pick up a little mirror and look at it and say something affirming to yourself. Wow. I mean, it's the craziest thing.
I want to meet the ghostwriter that made the game. Because, Joel didn't make the game.
Yeah, right.
But he signed the rights to the game.
Right.
To some guy who had to read the book and then go, there's got to be a board game here. All right, you have to say something nice to yourself.
We have in our podcast studio still to this day. So
the mirror? Or the game?
The entire game.
I would play the game. There was the secret board game too, I think.
I never played that one.
It kind of reminds me of how there's books about doing stand-up, and I've read a lot of them. But there's this kind of like supporting a podcast, like what we're saying at the beginning, where you want to do stand-up or you want to have the type of life that Joel is talking about. And unfortunately, we kind of have learned that buying something is doing something. It's like casting a vote towards that type of life. So playing the board game or playing the secret board game, which is like the new age equivalent of that, might not be called the secret board game, but whatever. We think, and buying a book about stand-up makes you one step closer to doing stand-up when open mics are free. But it feels good to buy a book. It just does.
Just go there and do it.
Yeah. Sorry. So you've been trying to ask this question, and I apologize.
Tell me about the guy in the first episode. Tell me about
Pete
growing up. you. Tell me
Yes.
about your journey growing up. Like, where's home?
Well, I'm from Lexington, Massachusetts,
Okay.
birthplace of the American Revolution. You're welcome.
That's right. I knew that.
We lost. Did you know that?
Well, I mean,
We lost the battle.
once you said it.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Well, I say that because, I look like I'm from Kentucky, so I have to say Massachusetts.
You actually really do look like you're from
I
Kentucky.
look corn-fed, yeah. Especially
You're much
today,
taller than I realized.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's off-putting. We were watching an edit today, and I was standing next to one of our writers, Greg Fitzsimmons, who's on the show on one of the episodes. And it's a 2-shot of me and him. And I'm like 9 feet taller than him. And he's like an average sized guy. And I'm like, good Lord, I'm so tall. And Penn Jillette told me that Lorne Michaels, Penn Gillette's also very tall.
Yeah.
That Lorne Michaels told him that tall people aren't funny. And it still hurt my feelings. He didn't say it to me. He probably has no idea who I am, but I'm just like, hey. Anyway, very tall.
So you grew up in Massachusetts.
Lexington, Massachusetts.
Okay, which surprises me that you grew up so Christian, because that's a very unchurched area.
Well, it's a very liberal.
Yeah.
Well, it's Massachusetts, which is kind of everything. Lexington is very hoity-toity, very expensive, I guess. My dad really is the American dream. When his father died, I joke that the age that my father was when his father died was always my age. It was when I was 12, he was 12. 13, I was 13, whatever it was. So it was between 12 and 16. And he took over the home heating oil business. He drove a bread truck. He really was that guy that for some reason he had the enzyme or the gene that was just like, I don't know, why do some crabs like leave the ocean and build a little nest? I don't even know if crabs do that. But whatever that hypothetical thing is, my dad had that. And he was like, I'm not going to raise my family in South Boston. I'm not going to raise them in Somerville. I'm getting us out of here. Met my wife. That was Freudian. Met my mother.
That was very Freudian.
Deal with it. Well, I was kind of putting myself in my father's shoes. Sure. I will fess up to Freud. If you've listened to my podcast, yeah. I think it's one of the most under-discussed aspects and just so in plain sight. I just got married. We didn't do any of that shit. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Weren't you just got back from your honeymoon?
Yeah, like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
That's awesome.
Thank you. But no mother-son dance, no daddy-daughter dance.
I didn't do a mother-son dance at my wedding.
Because it's gross.
It's weird.
I get it.
She tapped out and I tapped out too. I was like, it's cool. This high five. We don't need to do this.
And I love my mom very, very much, but we have issues with boundaries. And she thinks I'm making a lot of it up, but I think I'm smarter than she is. I'm just kidding. But so anyway, it wasn't Freudian stuff. Oh, right. My dad meets my mom. She also had whatever that crab gene is. So she's from Southie and my dad's from Somerville. And they wanted better. So my dad worked his ass off from the time he was 16 until blah, blah, blah. Got into real estate, bought a nice house in Lexington, Massachusetts, which was like the movie The Fighter. Did you see The Fighter? Mm-hmm. They go see a movie in Lexington. That was actually the movie theater I worked at called The Flick. But in the movie, it was kind of like, she even says like, you took me to la-di-da Lexington. That's what it was. And that's why my dad picked it. He was just kind of like, the last place a guy like me, no dad, lost his mom young too, hardworking, no collar, come home covered in oil every day. The last place people expect me to live is Lexington. So he found a house in Lexington, used all his contracting buddies and stuff and renovated it, bought a fixer-upper basically. I didn't know our whole lives he was struggling to pay for it. I knew there was a lot of tension in the house. I couldn't figure out why.
Right, sure.
But later in life, I found out that like there was a lot more tension than I knew, and they shielded us from it a good amount. Not completely, but a good amount. So, do you want the spiritual story?
Yeah. Church life.
Yeah, because there's different ways of telling the story. I just remember believing what grown-ups told me. I was also, I'd like to think I still am, but certainly when I was young, just a very sweet kid.
Yeah.
You just meet kids like that where you're just like, they just, please and thank you just feels right on these kids. And they like sharing and they have empathy. And I used to cry when I would see a squirrel get hit by a car. Like I just really had what I would consider now a very open heart. I don't know if I used that terminology then, but I was like, like an exposed nerve, and I felt other people's pain. I have very vivid memories of making eye contact with homeless people around Christmas. And I'm actually thinking about it now, and this guy asking for a penny. And I was just devastated by a grown man saying, I'm not even worth a penny. And it would actually, like with kids all the time, I would see a cartoon dog that was like, donate money to the animal cruelty thing. It was a cartoon. And I'd tell my dad I wanted money for something else, and I'd go and I'd put it in the cartoon dog because it had a slot on it. Just like a lot of, I wouldn't call it compassion because it wasn't that sophisticated, but a lot of vulnerability. And also just a lot of naturally occurring, what is fire? Like I remember being very interested in being like, what is fire? And someone would be like, well, it's the relationship of this and oxygen. And I'd be like, no, what is fire? Now, you know what I mean? Like,
those two things are still defining your life.
Oh, totally.
I was like, my word, clearly you know this. I mean, that's insane.
Relieving suffering is a huge thing for me. And then also figuring out what is fire. Yeah. What I really meant was, why is fire, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because they're right. That is what it is. And we can do that with most things. But it's in the Upanishads. I love this quote. It goes, not that which the mind can think, but whereby the mind can think. Not what the mind can think, but that whereby the mind can think. Mm-hmm. Not that what the eye can see, but that whereby the eye can see. Focus on that. What does it say? That's the eternal, not what men here adore. And I was like, that's the right there. And that's what I obviously didn't know that, but I mean, looking back, I remember very young having a lot of magical thoughts, having a lot of obsession with dreams. I was a very good dreamer. And I was a very bored kid. I'm very grateful for that. I would go to bed well before I was tired. And I spent, because there was just nothing to do. Dad was watching TV.
I would say no TV.
This wasn't like a multi-TV house. My dad is watching whatever. And there was this balcony in my indoor balcony, and the sound would bleed up. So it was like you go in your room and close the door and just go to bed. Like I didn't.
No creative, no reading, no drawing, no building Legos, no.
No. Later came video games, and that was a very, very wonderful, almost meditative.
I'm surprised, knowing how creative you are and how much wonder you have. I'm surprised you.
I played with action figures.
Okay,
you're helping me remember. I did that a lot, and I played with action figures until I was 18. And even then I only stopped because people would make fun of me. I would forget to clean them up, so they'd be all over my bed. And
as an 18-year-old?
Yeah.
Oh,
and then my friends would come over. Yeah. I know. I suppose so. I don't know what I would say to my son now if he were doing that. I think I would be like, it's totally fine. But the truth is, if you play Grand Theft Auto and you ever just like run from the police, don't play the missions, you just run from the police, or just go around and explore, you're playing with action figures. That's all you're doing.
Yeah.
It's socially acceptable action figures.
Yeah.
And there are men in their 50s not only playing these games, but making these games.
Right.
So it's now I get defensive about that. That's what I would say to my son now. I'd be like, it's all just imagination time.
Right.
Because when I play Grand Theft Auto, I don't just go, I'm running from the cops. I create a little story, and I don't do it because I'm trying to exercise my creativity. I do it because it makes it more fun. Mm-hmm. When I go on a walk, and when I used to walk home from school, you're helping me remember, I used to pretend it was a simulation, or I used to wonder what it would be like if there was a computer that could simulate a walk home, or how I knew it was real. Philosophy and all that stuff you think would have been like a natural fit for me, but it was so boring because nobody that I knew, it was just, I wasn't exposed to anybody that was like deeply passionate about the basics. Like, how are you hearing me? Like, just like the fact that the present moment is the only thing that's real, that it's eternal. When, this is a Rob Bell thing, but like when Jesus is talking about eternal life, to me, it has so much more to do with this. Like when you're really locked into the moment, you are in eternity. We're not measuring sunrises and sunsets because of a rock orbiting another rock. I know our bodies are decaying, and there's certain ways that we can perceive time that aren't suns and sunsets, but whatever. So I never ran into anybody that really got into that, and I kind of thought I was sort of alone. Like I didn't really have friends that wanted to get super deep. So when I got into the church and my parents just took us to church, my mother got into the Vineyard. Do you know the Vineyard?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the Vineyard.
Bob Wilbur.
Well, it was outside of Boston. The one
well, there's a bunch of vineyards. It started here in Southern California.
I think I knew that, and she found one, and she really
very worship focused, and
which I completely get.
Yeah, yeah.
To this day, my parents, I think a lot of their spirituality, it's hard to speak for them, but I think has a lot to do with music.
Yeah,
I know my father cries at hymns, and my dad doesn't cry. Like I don't say that like he's cool. I actually think he could work on that. but I do see him crying at the Hallelujah chorus or something. There's something that transcends the intellect, and that's very powerful. So the Vineyard and the singing and the personal relationship, my mother really wanted a buddy Jesus. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I still, I enjoy it in a different way, but meaning I don't ask for help as much as I ask for clarity.
Yeah.
That's different. Anyway, so she really wanted somebody with her, a Jiminy Cricket style, following around. And then that's the Jesus that I was introduced to. And as a very...
Like youth group age or child?
Young, a little bit younger.
Okay.
Certainly junior high, but I got really into it in high school.
Okay.
And...
At the Vineyard Church?
No, we started going to Grace Chapel in Lexington, which is similar. It's a non-denominational evangelical... it's non-denominational, but it's evangelical.
Sure. Yeah.
Church. Very casual, more like a convention center.
Yeah.
Simple wooden cross, no Jesus on it, Protestant and modern music. There's an organ, but there'd also be drums and stuff. And I just...
big church?
I would consider it big.
And you were in the youth group there?
I got into the youth group there, yeah. I played bass in the worship team. In high school, I started leading. I actually got kicked out of Mustard Seeds because I was a rapscallion. And then later I took over Mustard Seeds when I got a little bit more serious and led it. So I went from the guy that was booted out of it for being a disruption to the person who led it the next year. And something just shifted. I started going to a black church. I don't know if that's okay to say. A church that everybody there was African-American. It was a black church. In Mattapan, one Sunday a month.
Why?
Because there was an exchange. It was our sister church in Mattapan.
Whoa. You guys intentionally would do like a swap?
I don't know if they came to our church, but we would go to their church. And I don't mean it wasn't a takeover. It was like 10 people.
Yeah.
And I started to see, I don't want to generalize, but a lot of black churches have more passion.
Yeah.
So I saw a lot of people that really were singing it like they meant it and were, talking back to the pastor, and the pastor's sweating and raising his voice. And you're just like, oh, holy shit.
Were you drawn to that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember I was anointed. He asked who here has a call to the ministry. And me and a couple of my friends raised our hands, and he anointed us with oil.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal.
Yeah.
I've done spiritual things since then, like Amma, the hugging saint. I've got a hug from Amma. And I remember that feeling being similar to the feeling I had when I was blessed, or whatever you want to call it, in that church. So it happened.
Yeah.
I do remember having a certain degree of disappointment, spiritual materialism, where you're kind of like wishing you had a vision or something. Like,
Sure.
But I've kind of laid down.
That's the tough thing with I grew up in charismatic church and Pentecostal and all that. And that there's so much emphasis on the experience, the tangible experience of the Holy Spirit and feeling and all that. And that I remember in youth group, kids, getting baptized in the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues and stuff. And I'm standing there too, and I didn't. And and you kind of fake it because you don't want to be the one who didn't. And wait, are they faking it? I don't know. And they all just kind of.
And it turns out they are and they aren't.
Right. Yeah.
That's my opinion of tongues now. I don't know if you know Terence McKenna.
I know
Terence McKenna is a big psychonaut. Like he introduced a lot of people to DMT and mushrooms and acid and all that stuff. Very interesting thinker, apart from his ties to the drug community. But that was a big thing. And he would speak in tongues while he was under the influence of these things. And he would just kind of do it. He'd just be like, but he'd do it and he'd be like, where is this coming from? Just kind of like enjoying the phenomena of it, as opposed to what I think you and I did. I remember praying to the point of tears wanting to pray in tongues, but I wouldn't fake it.
Yeah.
So it didn't come.
So when I was standing there in a line where the preacher would come and like lay his hands on you, everybody's falling down.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let this dude push me down.
Yeah.
If the Lord knocks me down, the Lord knocks me down. And I almost like lean into it, like forward as opposed to allowing myself to just be swept up, because I want the real thing.
Is it real or
nothing at all?
Yeah. Is Jesus walking on glass or is it water?
Right.
Like we want to know the real thing.
Is it real or not?
And that's beautiful.
Right.
That's
what is fire?
Are we doing this or are we doing this?
Right.
And that came later, but it was sort of like do we believe this or do we believe this? And I think a lot of people I can't speak for a lot of people. It seems to me that a lot of people leave it at a certain point. For example, when I talk to my parents about faith now, I remember my dad was like, you're better with it than without it. And his perception, and when Reza Aslan did my podcast, he talks about how religion primarily throughout history has been a cultural identifying thing. I'm a Christian from Boston.
Right.
I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm a male Christian from Boston, and I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm a straight male Christian from Boston, and I'm a Red Sox fan. And we need identity, and it feels good, and it helps us. The world is so frightening, especially when you get down to the base of it. We're all just naked and outside. Like I like to think that the planet's outside. Like we think we're in a house right now, but the whole thing's outside.
Right.
And that's overwhelming. And then you go, no, it's not overwhelming. I'm a straight man from Boston, and I'm a Christian, and I'm a Red Sox fan. And suddenly we're a little bit less outside. So I completely get it. And I don't need my dad to change, but I think people like us at a certain point were like, I'm not going to pretend, speak in tongues. And again, I think the people that are quote unquote pretending don't think they're pretending, but I also don't think they're leaning in to not be pushed over either. It's kind of this middle ground that I don't have any judgment for. Because when Terrence McKenna would speak in tongues, I was like, oh, that's it. I'm not doing it. I can't really do it. He can do it. He just doesn't. I don't need to do it. I think if I practiced, you could get to that point where
you could say, here she comes on a Honda.
Yeah.
See my bow tie, tie my bow tie.
Yeah.
That's a good one to go to as well.
Should have bought a Hyundai, not a Yamaha.
There you go. Should have bought it. Yeah, no.
But I was fascinated with that stuff too. I mean, I think it's Ramana Maharishi who calls it, nope, it's Trungpa Rinpoche who calls it spiritual materialism. Wanting these things because, as they say on Mad Men, it's this year's candy pink stove. It's just the new thing to have. It's just the status thing. It's the same game we're playing when you buy a Honda, not a Yamaha. And that's nonsense. The equanimity I have now comes in a certain surrender where you're like, it's not about that. A big spiritual mantra for me is, and then what? It's like, what if you did have a vision when that guy put his hand on you? Mm-hmm. And then what? Like I've had incredible dreams, very vivid dreams. I'm not saying I predicted the future or anything super cool like that, or I've meditated to the point of really feeling extreme presence, like the type of stuff that you'd normally have to take a drug to get to. And I'm just like, I'm here, I got here. And then what? It's gone. It's what Ram Dass is. It's a moldering butterfly. It's just paper on fire. It's just gone. This is all that's here. And am I loving you, or am I being compassionate to the guy who wants a penny on Christmas, or am I not? And like, what is this hoarding? It's just another Western misappropriation of the message of living spirit, which is how much of this can I collect, bronze, and display when it has nothing to do with any of that. You can be far holier and have nothing to show for it than the guy that's, toothy and grinny and with the best-selling, but I'm not putting down Joel Osteen. I'm just saying it's not about that.
I didn't know who you were referring to. So why Christian college?
Well, fear. It was mostly fear. It was kind of a cowardice move.
See, I went because I got a scholarship. And honestly, it was like my parents were, going to pay for college wherever I wanted to go. And if I went to this school, I actually got an academic scholarship, and I wouldn't need their help. And so, out of like spite and independence,
for you.
And I ended up at Oral Roberts University.
So it's kind of like a twofer. It's like they didn't have to pay for it, and you went where they probably wanted you to go.
Where they probably wanted me to go, which was why I didn't want to go there. But then it was free, and then I went, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. And it actually ended up being a great experience for me.
I don't regret going to Gordon at all.
Yeah.
I think it's not, well, who cares? And then what, right?
Yeah.
I look back and I'm like, it wasn't exactly the most challenging school for me.
Yeah.
I have no memory of studying. I have no memory of ever having academic anxiety. But as a result of that, I had a lot of free time and a lot of time to think about what is fire.
Yeah.
A lot of time to kind of like create. That's when I really started doing improv, and that's where I started doing stand-up, and that's where I started writing humorous essays for the paper, which later became stuff I would use for stand-up. And that was essential. And if I had gone to a school, like I always say, like I'm not anti-pot, but at all. I mean, I have a lot of it inside if you'd like some. But it's like, I'm afraid, and this is what I would tell my son if I had a son. I'm just afraid that if I had smoked it when I was 18, I don't know if I'd be a comedian right now. I don't know if I can't say that for certainty. I can with alcohol too. Alcohol gets off easy. And I feel weird saying this because we grew up in traditions that probably hate alcohol. But the older I get, the more I'm like, no, that's a drug too.
Yeah, it is.
And it really kind of kept me back in a lot of ways that no one explained to me. At least with pot and heroin or cocaine, people are like, look out. With alcohol, they're just like, oh, go ahead. Like everybody does it. Your dad does it. This guy does it. Everybody's fine. Let's go. I'm so glad I went to a school where I didn't drink. I didn't start drinking until I was 21.
26.
And I'm grateful. I didn't smoke pot until I was 28 when my wife left me. My brother came over and smoked me up. And I remember not the day I smoked, but shortly after that going, if I had found this earlier, I don't know if I would have been anxious or bored enough to create the launch pad that I took off from. And that's concerning to me. So I'm very grateful for Gordon for being a boring, safe place, just like kind of like a still pond to put my fish in. And I just kind of grew. I felt safe to grow and evolve.
I think every Christian college has the comedy troupe that you were part of, you know, that had those comedy nights and stuff. And it was like such release. I remember you said something like, it was like all the pent up angst of the 19-year-olds who think they're going to hell because they masturbated earlier that day.
That's it.
And then those little comedy shows.
Who needs a laugh
were the
more?
Release. Yeah.
It was super fun.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
Was it a residential campus? Like everybody lived there and everything?
For the most part.
Yeah, us too. It was like, it's this little bubble.
1,600 kids, I think.
So we had about 4,000.
Okay.
But still, I mean, it's a bubble with 4,000 kids who are in the same
A bubble's
place.
a bubble.
A bubble's a bubble.
Yeah, but it did keep me sheltered. And I went in to become a youth pastor because going back to what we were saying, are we getting pushed over or are we not getting pushed over? And I said, if we believe that you either have Jesus and are saved or don't and you're going to hell, I never bought God needs doctors too. I was like, what the is the point of taking care of our bodies? Almost like a Christian Scientist or something like, or just like any kind of crazed or fervent, let's say fervent, less judgmental fundamentalist. I was like, okay, is this true or not? Why aren't you doing an altar call every service? And there are a lot of churches like this.
Mine does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? Good on them because at least you're following through on what the you told me is going on here. Val's father is a pastor. They do an altar call every time.
Yeah.
And if you were, I don't know, any altar call I went up. Anytime it was like, do you want to reaffirm
I got saved
your
18 times
salvation
every year.
Because I was so concerned it didn't stick.
Yeah, I know, right?
And why
didn't stick thing.
All you have to do is walk up with your eyes closed. It's fine. and you just kind of like, it's like wearing 2 condoms. It's like, just do it. Like, be extra safe. So it started from, it was also Mom and me had religion. And Dad and my brother had sports.
Oh, okay.
And they're similar hobbies.
Sure.
You know, stats. You know, when the Bible would come up on Jeopardy, me and my mom would like
crush it.
Lean in.
Yeah,
and crush it. And it was great. And I thought that was so cool. And it was something, I teased my mother earlier, but we've always had a very special relationship. Very close. Just kind of cosmically close. I think she's nuts. I'd say that if she was here. Be like, Mom, you're nuts.
She probably thinks you're nuts.
She thinks I'm nuts too, which is great. Who cares? You know what I'm saying? But like, we can be honest and tease each other in that way. But, you know, now I feel bad for calling her nuts. But anyway, we had religion. Gordon College had a choir that came and sang at Grace Chapel once a year. And I remember my mom thinking that was beautiful. And maybe one Sunday, she just was like, maybe you'll go to Gordon. I bet that happened. Yeah. And it just planted in my subconscious. And my family didn't put much of priority on higher education or even going. I think my mom told me that I wasn't going to go. I didn't feel the need to go. And that would have been okay. And then one day, my friend John Orelli, who's now a pastor, was like, I'm going to go tour schools. And we went to Eastern, and we went to Houghton, and we went to Taylor, and we went to Gordon. And I was like...
Taylor, in the middle of nowhere, Indiana.
That's right.
I've been there.
There was a guy named Muntz, there was biscuits and gravy in the cafeteria. I remember there's a statue of these two black men, I think. It might even be slaves being freed or something. It's weird. And we're like, why is the only black people here bronzed? Like, it was a really weird feeling because we were from Boston, so there was diversity. So we were like not comfortable in middle of nowhere, Indiana. I mean, I'm not going to clarify that. There's parts of Indiana that are metropolises, is all I point. So anyway, I decided to go to Gordon, and I'm like, are we doing this or are we doing this?
Right.
And if what you're telling me is you need Jesus or you burn forever, all these questions that would be salved by Rob's book, Love Wins, which I'm rereading because it's a huge part of the book that I'm writing. And it's still just, I get excited. Like it's like drinking a cup of coffee or something. It energizes and stimulates me to no end because it asked all these questions that no one seemed to be asking. And I actually think that's my favorite part of the book. It's just the first chapter, the intro in the first chapter where he's just saying, so if this is true, then what about this? Then and I'm just like, I loved it. Yeah. It's like what I was saying about Alan Watts is these like kind of iconoclastic people. So that didn't last. My freshman year, I made friends that were girls and was more interested in that and just became far more interested in comedy than I was in the church.
Well, that was comedian Pete Holmes. Make sure to tune in to part 2 of the conversation. You won't want to miss what he would tell his younger self. And make sure to check out his semi-autobiographical HBO series, Crashing. Though I have to warn you, it's an HBO show for a reason. Hey, if you like this episode of Unedited, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We have an incredible lineup of guests coming up this season, and you won't want to miss an episode. Also, I'd love your help spreading word about the show. Rating and reviewing it on iTunes especially helps a ton, as well as sharing it on social media. Thanks in advance. Well, I'm Cameron Strang. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.
Relevant Podcast Network.